I'll never forget the sound my keys made when they hit the kitchen counter that Tuesday evening. It was the same metallic clink I'd heard 1,000 times before, but somehow in the suffocating silence of our apartment, it echoed differently. Wrong. Like the universe was trying to warn me about what I was about to discover. My name is Sophia, and 3 months ago I thought I had everything figured out. I was 28, working as a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm in Denver, married to a man I believed was my forever person and genuinely happy. Or at least I thought I was happy. Looking back now, I realize I was living in a carefully constructed illusion, one that my husband Jake had been building brick by brick since the day we met. That Tuesday started like any other. I'd had back-to-back client meetings, grabbed a sad desk lunch of leftover pasta, and texted Jake around 2 in the afternoon asking if he wanted me to pick up Thai food on my way home. He loved this one place near our apartment that made these incredible drunken noodles. The text showed as delivered. Then read. But no response came. I figured he was busy at work. He'd been putting in crazy hours at his sales job lately, or so he said. When I walked through our apartment door at 6:30, I immediately sensed something off. The air felt different, stiller somehow, like the space itself was holding its breath. I called out Jake's name. Nothing. I set down my bag and my laptop, slipped off my shoes, and that's when I noticed it. His sneakers weren't by the door. Jake always left his sneakers right by the door, a habit that used to drive me insane because he'd just kick them off wherever and they'd sit there for days. I walked into our bedroom and my stomach dropped so fast I actually felt dizzy. His closet was empty. Not messy empty like he'd frantically grabbed some stuff. Completely, methodically empty. Every single hanger bare. His dresser drawers hung open, hollow. Even his stupid collection of vintage band t-shirts that he was so obsessed with, gone. The framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Maui that always sat on his nightstand? Also gone. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. Panic was rising in my chest like floodwater and I couldn't breathe right. I checked the bathroom, his toothbrush, his razor, his cologne, all of it vanished. It was like he'd been erased from our life. Then I saw the envelope on the kitchen table. Plain white, my name written on it in his handwriting. I recognized the penmanship immediately. Jake had this distinctive way of writing capital S's that looped too far to the left. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears as I picked up the envelope. My fingers fumbled with it twice before I managed to tear it open. The note inside was 3 sentences long. 3 sentences. Sophia, I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself and figure out what I really want. I'm sorry. I read it 5 times, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't feel like my entire world was collapsing. I'm sorry? That was it. After 4 years together, 2 years of marriage, after building a whole life with someone, I got 3 sentences and I'm sorry? Hey, quick pause here. If you're watching this and already feeling the rage building, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and what you'd do in this situation. I need to know I'm not alone in thinking this is absolutely insane. I sat down at that kitchen table, notes still in my hand, and I didn't cry. Not yet. I was in shock, that strange numb space where your brain just refuses to process what's happening because it's too enormous, too sudden. I kept thinking he'd walk back through the door any second and tell me it was some kind of sick joke, or that I'd misunderstood something fundamental about the situation. But he didn't come back. And slowly, as the shock began to wear off, the rage started to simmer underneath. Not boiling over yet, just a low, dangerous heat spreading through my chest. I needed to do something, anything, so I opened my laptop with trembling hands and logged into our joint bank account. We'd had it since we got married. Both our paychecks deposited there, all our bills coming out of it, the account we'd been saving in for a down payment on a house someday. The balance showed $47.82. I stared at that number, my vision actually blurring at the edges. Last week there had been over $12,000 in that account. I checked it myself when I paid our rent. $12,000. Money I'd contributed to. Money from my paychecks, my freelance design projects, birthday gifts from my parents, tax returns we'd saved. Gone. All of it. Except for $47.82. That's when I started crying. Not delicate tears either, full-body sobs that made my shoulders shake and my breathing come in these awful gasping hiccups. I cried for the money, yes, but more than that, I cried for the betrayal, for the careful planning this must have taken, For the man I thought I knew who could apparently empty our bank account and disappear without even having the decency to do it to my face. I don't know how long I sat there at that table, crying in our apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and foreign. Eventually, my tears dried up because apparently, the human body can only produce so much salt water before it just gives up. I felt hollowed out like someone had scooped out my insides with a spoon and left just the shell behind. My phone buzzed. For a split second, hope flared in my chest. Maybe it was Jake, maybe he was calling to explain to fix this nightmare. But it was just my best friend Casey texting about getting drinks this weekend. I didn't respond. I couldn't form words yet. Instead, I did something that would turn out to be the smartest decision I made that entire terrible night. I screenshot the bank account balance. Then I logged into our credit card accounts to see if maybe, just maybe, Jake had transferred the money somewhere else for some reason I wasn't understanding. What I found instead made my blood run cold. Our joint credit card, the one we barely used that we'd kept for emergencies and to build credit, had a balance of $30,247.63. $30,000. The credit limit had been $15,000 when we opened it. Somehow Jake had requested a limit increase without telling me, and then he'd maxed it out completely and then some. I clicked through the recent transactions with hands that had gone numb. Flights, hotels, restaurants I'd never been to. A jewelry purchase for $1,800 that definitely hadn't been for me. Charges from California, which was wild because Jake had told me he was traveling to Chicago for work conferences twice last month. He'd lied. About everything. 4 months probably. And now he was gone with another woman I didn't even know existed, and I was sitting in our apartment holding the bag for $30,000 worth of his reckless, selfish decisions. The worst part. The absolute worst part? I'd been so stupid. So blind. There had been signs. Late nights he explained away with work pressure, his phone always face down on tables, the way he'd started showering immediately when he got home instead of collapsing on the couch like he used to. I'd noticed all of it and explained it away because I trusted him. Because I loved him. Because I thought that's what you did in a marriage. You gave your partner the benefit of the doubt. I took screenshots of everything. Every transaction. Every statement. Every penny of that $30,000 nightmare. I didn't know what I'd need them for yet, but some survival instinct had kicked in, and I was documenting everything like I was collecting evidence for a crime. Which in a way I guess I was. It was almost midnight when I finally moved from that kitchen table. My body ached from sitting in one position for so long, and my eyes were swollen from crying. I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now I guess, and stared at Jake's empty closet. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to track him down and demand answers. Part of me just wanted to crawl into bed and sleep until this was all somehow fixed. But instead I felt something else crystallizing in my chest. Something harder and sharper than grief. Something that tasted like fury and felt like steel. Jake thought he could just walk away. Take everything, leave me with his mess and start fresh with someone new. He thought I'd be so broken, so desperate, so lost without him that I'd just, what? Fall apart? Beg him to come back. Take responsibility for his debt and clean up after him like I'd been doing our entire marriage without even realizing it? No. I wasn't going to do any of that. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but as I stood there in the ruins of my marriage, looking at the empty space where my husband's clothes used to be, I made myself a promise. Jake had made a choice. Now I was going to make mine. And he was going to regret every single second of underestimating me. Let me take you back to the beginning because you need to understand who Jake was, or at least who I thought he was, to really grasp how completely he fooled me. I met Jake 4 years ago at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue in Boulder. I was 24, fresh out of a relationship with a guy who'd been sweet but directionless, and I wasn't really looking for anything serious. I just landed my first real design job and was focused on building my career, proving to myself and everyone else that my art degree wasn't the waste of money my dad had worried it would be. Jake showed up late to that barbecue, carrying a 6-pack of craft beer and wearing this confident smile that lit up his whole face. He was handsome in that accessible boy-next-door kind of way, sandy brown hair that always looked slightly messy in an intentional way, green eyes that crinkled when he laughed, tall but not intimidatingly so. He worked in sales for a tech startup, and when he talked about his job, his passion was contagious. He made cold calling sound like an adventure and closing deals sound like winning the lottery. We talked for 3 hours straight at that barbecue. He was funny, charming, attentive in a way that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He asked questions about my design work and actually listened to the answers, didn't just wait for his turn to talk. When I told him about my dream of one day starting my own creative agency, he didn't laugh or tell me to be realistic. He said, "When you do that, I'll be your first client." Not if. When. I fell for him fast. Too fast probably, but it felt right in that reckless, exhilarating way first love does when you're in your 20s and think you're invincible. Our relationship moved quickly. We were officially together within 2 weeks of that barbecue. He'd show up at my apartment with my favorite coffee order memorized, leave little notes in my car when he borrowed it, text me random thoughts throughout the day just because he was thinking of me. It felt like being the center of someone's universe, and God, that was intoxicating. 6 months in, he asked me to move in with him. I hesitated. My mom had always told me not to rush these things, to really know someone before tangling your life with theirs. But Jake was persuasive. He painted this picture of coming home to each other every night, cooking dinners together, building a real partnership. Plus, he argued it made financial sense. We were already spending every night together anyway, and rent in Denver was getting ridiculous. Why pay for 2 apartments when we could split one? So I said yes. I gave up my little studio apartment with the amazing natural light that was perfect for my design work, and I moved into Jake's 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill. The first year of living together was mostly good. Sure, there were adjustments. He was messier than I'd realized, had a habit of leaving cabinet doors open that drove me insane, and snored like a congested bear when he drank too much. But those were normal things, the little incompatibilities you work through when you're building a life with someone. What I didn't see, what I completely missed because I was too busy being in love, were the red flags waving frantically in the background. Jake was always a spender. He liked nice things, expensive restaurants, the latest tech gadgets, designer sneakers that cost more than my monthly car payment. When I'd gently bring up saving money or sticking to a budget, he'd wave me off with that charming smile. "Life's too short to pinch pennies, Soph," he'd say. "We're young. We're supposed to enjoy ourselves." And I believed him. I believed that his sales job paid well enough to support his lifestyle. I believed him when he said he'd gotten a big commission check when a new PlayStation showed up at our door. I believed him when he said he was treating us to a weekend trip to Vegas because he'd exceeded his quarterly targets. I believed everything because I wanted to believe. Because calling him a liar would mean admitting I'd been stupid, and I wasn't ready to face that. After 2 years together, Jake proposed. We were hiking at Red Rocks, one of my favorite places in Colorado, and he got down on one knee at sunset with a ring that must have cost a fortune. It was beautiful. A princess-cut diamond that caught the light like it was made of fire. I cried happy tears and said yes without hesitation, already mentally planning the wedding, imagining our future kids, picturing us old and gray and still holding hands. The wedding was small, just close friends and family at a venue in the mountains that looked like something out of a fairy tale. My mom cried during the vows. My dad gave a speech about how Jake better take care of his little girl. Jake's parents, who I'd grown to love, welcomed me into their family with open arms. It was perfect. Everything I'd ever dreamed of. We honeymooned in Maui, and for those 7 days, life felt flawless. We snorkeled with sea turtles, watched the sunrise from the top of Haleakala, made love on our hotel balcony overlooking the ocean. Jake was attentive, romantic, present in a way he hadn't been in months leading up to the wedding when he'd been stressed about work. I thought marriage had changed something in him, made him relax, made him realize what really mattered. I was so wrong. The problems started small. A few months after the wedding, I noticed our joint account balance seemed lower than it should be. When I asked Jake about it, he got defensive. Said I was being controlling, that he didn't realize he'd married his mother, that he was allowed to spend his own money. We had our first real fight that night, voices raised, doors slammed. He apologized the next morning with flowers and breakfast in bed, said he'd been stressed about work and took it out on me, that it wouldn't happen again. It did happen again. And again. And again. The pattern became familiar. I'd notice money missing or a charge I didn't recognize. I'd ask about it. Jake would get angry or defensive, then he'd apologize and promise to be better about communication. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own marriage, afraid to bring up money because it would inevitably lead to a fight. So I stopped bringing it up. I just let it go. I told myself that marriages required compromise, that not everything had to be a battle, that maybe I was being too controlling about finances. I convinced myself that as long as we were paying our bills and had food on the table, the rest didn't matter that much. But deep down in that place I didn't want to examine too closely. I knew something was wrong. I knew Jake was hiding things from me. I just didn't want to know what, because once you know something you can't unknow it. Once you see the truth you can't pretend anymore. Jake started working late more often. At first it was once or twice a week he'd text saying he had to close a big deal or help a colleague with a pitch. Then it became 3 or 4 times a week. Then it was most nights him coming home after 9 or 10, smelling like beer and cologne, explaining that the team had gone out for drinks after sealing a contract. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted so badly to believe him. He stopped touching me the way he used to. Sex became perfunctory, routine, something we did out of obligation rather than desire. He was always on his phone even when we were supposed to be having quality time together. When I'd try to plan date nights or suggest we do something fun together, he'd make excuses. He was tired from work, he had an early meeting, he'd already made plans with his buddies. Our marriage was dying and I was watching it happen in slow motion, too paralyzed by fear to do anything about it. Because addressing it meant facing the possibility that I'd made a mistake. That the man I'd married wasn't who I thought he was. That my perfect love story was actually a tragedy and I'd been too blind to see it. The worst part? I blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't interesting enough anymore, wasn't attractive enough, wasn't supportive enough of his career. I tried harder, cooked his favorite meals, wore lingerie to bed, asked about his work even when I could tell he didn't want to talk about it. I twisted myself into knots trying to be the wife he wanted, never stopping to ask if he was being the husband I deserved. Looking back now I can see all the signs I missed. Or maybe not missed. Maybe I saw them and chose to ignore them because the truth was too painful. The late-night phone calls he'd take in the other room. The weekend team-building retreat he went on where he conveniently had no cell service for 2 days. The time I found a receipt for a romantic restaurant in his jacket pocket, one we'd never been to together, dated on a night he said he'd been working late at the office. When I asked him about that receipt he had an answer ready immediately. Too ready. He said it was from a client dinner, that he'd taken a potential account out to seal a deal. His response was so smooth, so confident, that I felt stupid for even questioning him. He made me feel like I was being paranoid, jealous, crazy. So I apologized. I actually apologized for doubting him, for not trusting him, for being the kind of wife who went through her husband's pockets looking for evidence of infidelity. That's what he'd reduced me to. A woman who apologized for her own intuition, who second-guessed her own instincts, who chose his comfort over her own reality. And through all of this I had no idea about the debt. No clue that while I was carefully budgeting my paychecks, transferring money into our savings account, and cutting coupons for groceries like my mom taught me, Jake was racking up thousands of dollars in credit card charges. Living a completely separate financial life I knew nothing about. He must have been getting the statements sent to his work email. Must have been making minimum payments from some account I didn't have access to. Must have been juggling this elaborate lie for months, maybe even years, while I slept next to him every night completely oblivious. The Jake I married, or thought I married, didn't exist. He was a character, a performance, a carefully constructed illusion designed to get what he wanted. And I'd been the perfect audience, believing every word, applauding every act, completely blind to the reality happening behind the curtain. That Tuesday night when I found his note, I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing the story I'd been telling myself about who we were, about who I was, about what my life meant. Everything I thought I knew was a lie, and I was left standing in the wreckage trying to figure out which pieces of myself were real and which were just reflections of what he'd wanted me to be. But here's what Jake didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted because he'd never bothered to really see me. Underneath all that hurt and betrayal and shock I was still me. Sophia. The girl who'd put herself through college working 3 jobs. The woman who'd built a design career from nothing. The person who'd learned from her mother that you don't break just because someone tries to break you. Jake had underestimated me. He'd thought I was weak, dependent, lost without him. He'd thought wrong. And he was about to find that out the hard way. The morning after Jake disappeared, I woke up on the couch. I hadn't been able to bring myself to sleep in our bed. The empty space where he should have been felt too massive, too final. My neck ached from the awkward angle I'd slept at. My eyes were crusty from dried tears, and for about 3 glorious seconds after I opened them, I forgot what had happened. Then reality crashed back in like a wave and I felt that sick hollow feeling spread through my chest all over again. My phone showed 7 missed calls from my mom and about 15 texts from Casey asking if I was okay. I'd ignored everyone last night, too raw to explain, too shocked to form coherent sentences. But I couldn't hide forever. I called in sick to work. My boss, thankfully, didn't ask questions when I said I had a family emergency. Then I made coffee with shaking hands and sat back down at that kitchen table where my life had imploded 12 hours earlier. I needed a plan. I couldn't just sit here drowning in my feelings, as tempting as that was. Jake had made his move and now I needed to make mine. But first I needed information. I started by calling the credit card company. After navigating through about 7 automated menus and waiting on hold for 20 minutes, I finally got a human being on the line. Her name was Patricia and she sounded tired. "Hi, yes, I'm calling about account ending in 4762, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a balance of over $30,000 that I didn't authorize. My husband," the word tasted bitter in my mouth. "My husband has been making charges without my knowledge." Patricia put me on hold while she pulled up the account. When she came back, her voice had shifted to that careful, practiced sympathy customer service reps use when delivering bad news. "Ma'am, I'm showing that this is a joint account, which means both account holders have equal authorization to make charges. According to our records, your husband requested a credit limit increase 3 months ago, which was approved based on the household income reported on the application." My stomach dropped. But I didn't know about any of this. I didn't sign anything. For joint accounts, only one signer is required for limit increases if they're the primary account holder. Looking at your account, your husband is listed as primary. Of course he was. Jake had set up the account years ago, back when we first moved in together. I just added my name to it without thinking about the implications, trusting him to handle our finances responsibly. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked, hearing the desperation creeping into my voice. "Can I dispute the charges? Remove myself from the account?" Patricia sighed softly. "You can certainly file disputes on individual transactions if you believe they're fraudulent, but since it's a joint account with authorized charges from the primary holder, those disputes likely won't be successful. As for removing yourself, you'd need to pay off the balance first or have the primary account holder remove you, which requires his consent." I felt like I was drowning. So I'm just stuck with this debt? Even though he's the one who spent all the money. In terms of the credit card company, yes, ma'am. Both joint account holders are equally responsible for the debt. However, you may want to consult with an attorney about your legal options regarding your spouse. This sounds like it might be a matter for family court. Family court. Attorney. The words felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I thanked Patricia and hung up, then immediately Googled divorce attorney Denver, with fingers that felt numb. The search results overwhelmed me. Dozens of law firms, all with websites full of stock photos of happy families and serious-looking people in suits. How was I supposed to choose? How did anyone choose who to trust with the destruction of their marriage? I clicked on the first one that didn't look too corporate, a smaller firm called Reynolds and Associates. Their website said they offered free consultations. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. The receptionist who answered was kind, professional. She asked a few basic questions about my situation, and when I got to the part about Jake emptying our bank account and disappearing, I heard her intake of breath. "Han, I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said, her professional veneer cracking slightly to reveal genuine sympathy. "Let me see if I can squeeze you in with Michelle Reynolds today. She's our senior partner and she specializes in cases like yours. How's 2 o'clock? I looked at the time. It was barely 9 in the morning. That works. Thank you. After I hung up, I forced myself to eat something even though I had no appetite. Toast. Just plain toast, because the thought of anything more substantial made my stomach turn. Then I showered for the first time since Jake left, standing under the hot water until it ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling of violation that clung to my skin. As I got dressed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked like hell, puffy eyes, tangled hair, skin pale and blotchy. But underneath the devastation I saw something else. A hardness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. A set to my jaw that felt unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Jake had done this thinking I'd fall apart. He probably imagined me sobbing, begging him to come back, desperate and helpless without him. The old Sophia, the one from 24 hours ago, might have done exactly that. But something had shifted in me overnight. Maybe it was the shock wearing off. Maybe it was rage finally finding its footing. Whatever it was, I felt it settling into my bones like concrete. Cold, heavy, permanent. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to fight. At 2 o'clock exactly, I walked into the offices of Reynolds and Associates. The space was nicer than I'd expected. Exposed brick walls, modern furniture, and art that actually looked good instead of generic. The receptionist who'd been kind on the phone was even kinder in person. A woman in her 50s with warm eyes and a smile that felt genuine. Sophia? Michelle is ready for you. Right this way. Michelle Reynolds was in her early 40s, I guessed, with sharp features and sharper eyes. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe and had her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She stood when I entered her office and shook my hand with a grip that was firm and confident. Sophia, thank you for coming in. Please sit. Can I get you water? Coffee. Water would be great, thank you. She poured me a glass from a pitcher on her desk, then settled into her chair and pulled out a legal pad. So, tell me what's going on. Take your time and don't worry about how it sounds. I've heard it all, I promise. I told her everything. The note, the empty bank account, the $30,000 credit card debt, Jake's systematic vanishing act. Michelle took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her expression neutral and professional throughout. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with something that might have been respect. First of all, I want you to know that what your husband did is unconscionable, but it's also, unfortunately, not uncommon. You'd be surprised how many people I see in situations almost identical to yours. That's somehow both comforting and horrifying, I said. She smiled slightly. I know. Here's the good news. You have options and they're better than you probably think. Let's start with the debt. In Colorado, we're not a community property state, but we do have equitable distribution laws. That means that debts incurred during the marriage are generally considered marital debt, but the court can assign responsibility based on who actually benefited from the spending. So I might not be stuck with all $30,000? Not just might not, you almost certainly won't be. Especially if we can prove that you didn't know about the debt and didn't benefit from the spending. Those charges you showed me, the flights, hotels, jewelry that wasn't for you? That's all evidence that Jake was spending marital funds on an extramarital affair. A judge will not look kindly on that. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a tiny spark of hope flicker in my chest. Michelle continued, as for the bank account, did you say it was joint? Yes, both our names on it. Then legally he had the right to withdraw that money. Shitty, and a judge will factor it into the overall asset division, but you can't claim it was theft in the criminal sense. However, she held up a finger. It does establish a pattern of financial misconduct that will work in your favor during divorce proceedings. Every action he's taken makes your case stronger. I want to file for divorce, I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I'd intended. As soon as possible. We can do that. Colorado has a mandatory 91-day waiting period from the time you file to when the divorce can be finalized, but we can get the paperwork started immediately. I also recommend you file for legal separation in the meantime, which will formally separate your finances and protect you from any additional debt he might try to incur. Yes. Let's do that. Michelle walked me through the next steps. I'd need to gather documentation. Bank statements, credit card bills, pay stubs, anything that showed our financial situation. She'd draft a petition for legal separation and eventually divorce. We'd need to serve Jake with the papers, which meant I'd have to know where he was. Have you heard from him at all since he left? Michelle asked. No. Nothing. His phone goes straight to voicemail. Do you know who he left with? The other woman. I shook my head. I have no idea. I didn't even know there was another woman until I saw the credit card charges. We'll subpoena his phone records if necessary. For now, do you have any mutual friends who might know where he is? Any family? I thought about Jake's parents, Tom and Linda, who I'd grown to love over the years. They were good people and I couldn't imagine they knew what their son had done. His parents maybe. But I don't want to involve them if I don't have to. They don't deserve to be dragged into this mess. That's kind of you, but Sophia, you need to protect yourself here. If Jake's parents know where he is, we need that information to serve him papers. You're not the one dragging them into anything. Jake did that when he abandoned his marriage. He was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of calling Tom and Linda, of hearing their voices and having to explain what their son had done, made me want to cry all over again. Michelle must have seen something in my face because her expression softened. You don't have to do anything right now. Go home, rest, process everything we've talked about. I'm going to start drafting the separation paperwork. We'll need a retainer to officially begin representation. My fee is $300 an hour, and I'll need $2,500 upfront to get started. My heart sank. $2,500. Money I didn't have because Jake had taken it all. I don't have that right now, I admitted, feeling shame burn in my cheeks. He cleaned out our account. I have about $47 to my name until my next paycheck. Michelle was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled out a contract from her desk drawer and slid it across to me. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start the work now today, and you're going to pay me back in installments once we get your finances sorted out. I've been doing this for 15 years, Sophia. I can tell when someone is genuinely in crisis versus someone trying to take advantage. You need help and you need it now. We'll work out the payment plan later. I felt tears prick my eyes again, but this time they weren't from despair. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. But I promise you this, by the time we're done, Jake is going to regret every single decision that led him to this moment. I left Michelle's office 2 hours later with a folder full of paperwork, a list of tasks to complete, and something I hadn't had since I found Jake's note. A plan. A real, concrete plan for moving forward. Back at my apartment, I sat down at my laptop and started going through our financial records systematically. Every bank statement from the last 2 years. Every credit card bill. Every receipt I could find. I created a spreadsheet documenting everything, color-coding charges based on whether I recognized them or not. The more I dug, the more I found. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, cash withdrawals I couldn't account for, payments to services I didn't recognize. Jake had been living a double life, and the evidence was right there in black and white, a paper trail of betrayal stretching back months. My phone rang around 7 that evening. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Sophia? It's Linda. Jake's mom. My heart stopped. Linda, hi. Honey, I wanted to call and check on you. Jake's father and I just found out what happened. Well, we found out some version of what happened. Jake called us this afternoon very upset, saying you two had separated and he needed some space. But he was vague about the details, and when I pressed him he got defensive. Something doesn't feel right about this, and I wanted to hear your side. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Of course Jake had already started spinning his narrative, making himself the victim. Linda, I don't want to put you in the middle of this. Sophia, you're my daughter-in-law. You've been part of this family for 4 years. Whatever happened between you and Jake, I love you and I deserve to know the truth. So please, just tell me what's going on. So I did. I told her everything. Coming home to find him gone, the empty bank account, the massive debt, the evidence of another woman. By the time I finished, Linda was crying on the other end of the line. Oh, Sophia. Oh, honey, I am so sorry. I didn't raise him to be this person. I don't even recognize who he's become. Do you know where he is? I asked quietly. Linda was silent for a long moment. He's in San Diego. With a woman named Tara. She's someone he worked with, I should say. Apparently they both quit their jobs and decided to start fresh, together. He told us it was all very sudden and romantic, like he expected us to be happy for him. When I asked about the marriage, he said you two had grown apart, and that the separation was mutual. He didn't mention the money, the debt, any of it. San Diego. With a coworker named Tara. So that's who'd been worth destroying our marriage for. Thank you for telling me, Linda. I know this must be hard for you. What's hard is learning that my son is a liar and a coward, she said, her voice hard with anger. Sophia, if there's anything Tom and I can do to help you through this, anything at all, you let us know. You hear me? You're not alone in this. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time, staring at nothing. Jake was in San Diego with Tara, probably thinking he'd gotten away with everything. Probably convinced that I was at home falling apart, too broken to do anything but cry over him. He had no idea that I was sitting here with a lawyer, a plan, and information about exactly where to find him to serve him divorce papers. I opened my messages and texted Michelle, I found him. San Diego. When can we file? Her response came back within minutes. First thing Monday morning. Get ready, Sophia. The war begins now. I looked around the apartment. My apartment now, not ours. At the empty spaces where Jake used to be. At the life I'd built that he'd tried to destroy. And I smiled. Let the games begin. Michelle filed the legal separation paperwork first thing Monday morning, exactly as promised. By Tuesday afternoon, we had a process server on his way to San Diego with the documents. Linda had been helpful in a way I never expected. She'd gotten Jake's exact address from him under the guise of wanting to send him some things he'd left at their house. She'd been furious when she called me with the information, her voice tight with barely controlled rage at her own son. You make sure he pays for what he's done, she told me. Tom and I are behind you 100%. While I waited for the papers to be served, I did something that felt both petty and necessary. I changed all the passwords to everything. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, our shared cloud storage, everything we'd ever linked together digitally. I removed his access to our apartment building's app. I called the landlord and explained the situation, asking that Jake's name be removed from the lease at the end of our current term. The landlord, a kind woman in her 60s named Mrs. Chen, was sympathetic and agreed immediately. I had a husband like that once, she'd said simply. Good riddance to bad rubbish. I also did something smarter. I opened a new bank account in my name only and had my direct deposit switched to it. Every dollar I earned from that point forward would be mine and mine alone. No more joint accounts, no more shared finances, no more trusting someone else with my financial security. Casey came over Wednesday night with Thai food and wine. I'd finally told her everything the day before and she'd responded with a string of creative profanities about Jake that would have made a sailor blush, followed by, I'm coming over and we're going to burn something of his. We didn't actually burn anything. The apartment had smoke detectors, but we did gather up every single thing Jake had left behind, which wasn't much but included some random socks, an old hoodie and a coffee mug from his college, and threw it all in a box labeled trash in huge letters. I never liked him, you know, Casey said, refilling my wine glass. I mean, I was nice because he was your husband, but there was always something off about him. He was too smooth, you know, like a used car salesman. Why didn't you say anything? She looked at me with sad eyes. Would you have listened? You were so in love, sophomore. And I didn't have any proof he was a bad guy, just a feeling. You can't tell someone their relationship is doomed based on a feeling. He was right. I wouldn't have listened. I would have defended Jake, gotten angry at Casey for not supporting my marriage, maybe even pulled away from our friendship. Love makes you stupid like that. Well, your instincts were better than mine, I said, taking a long sip of wine. Your instincts were fine. You just ignored them because you wanted to believe the best in someone you loved. That's not a character flaw, sophomore. That's being human. Thursday afternoon, I was at work trying to focus on a logo redesign for a client when my phone buzzed. Text from Michelle. Papers served. He signed for them an hour ago. The clock is ticking. I felt a surge of satisfaction so strong it was almost physical. Jake now knew that I wasn't sitting around crying and waiting for him to come back. He knew I'd hired a lawyer. He knew I was coming for him legally. I wondered what his face had looked like when he opened that envelope. Shock? Anger? Fear? I hoped it was all three. Friday morning, exactly 3 days after Jake had disappeared from my life, I was in my apartment getting ready for work when I heard it. A key scraping in the door lock. My heart jumped into my throat. For a second I thought maybe it was a break-in, but then I heard a familiar voice cursing softly as the key didn't work. I'd had the locks changed Wednesday afternoon. Another thing Michelle had advised. Sophia, are you in there? The key isn't working. Jake was at my door. I stood frozen in my bedroom for a moment, my mind racing. What was he doing here? Why had he come back? Sophia, please, I need to talk to you. It's important. His voice sounded desperate, panicked even. Nothing like the confident, charming man who'd left me that note 3 days ago. I walked to the door slowly, my heart hammering. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, and I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was a mess, he had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes looked slept in. He looked like a man who'd been through hell. Good. What do you want, Jake? I asked through the door, my voice surprisingly steady. Oh, thank God, Sophia, please open the door. I need to talk to you. I made a huge mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Please just let me explain. You can explain through the door. I'm comfortable where I am. I heard him take a shaky breath. She left me. Yesterday. We got into a huge fight about money and she took off with the rest of the cash from our account and I haven't heard from her since. Her phone is off. I think she blocked me. Sophia, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I had nowhere else to go and I need help. I leaned my forehead against the door, processing this information. Tara had left him. The woman he'd destroyed our marriage for had abandoned him after 3 days. And now he was back at my door begging for help. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. That sounds like a you problem, Jake, I said. Sophia, please. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I'm desperate here. I don't have any money. Tara took it all. My credit cards are maxed out. My parents won't return my calls after they found out I lied to them. I have nowhere to stay. You just need what? For me to take you back? To fix your problems like I always did? To pretend the last 3 days didn't happen? No, I just need a place to crash for a few days while I figure things out. That's all I'm asking. You can have the couch, I'll sleep on the floor, I don't care. I just need somewhere to stay. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of this man to show up at my door after emptying our bank account, maxing out our credit card, abandoning me for another woman, and then asking me to house him when his grand plan fell apart. Did you get the papers I sent you? I asked. Silence. Then quietly, yes. Did you read them? Yes. Then you know that we're legally separated as of this morning. That means you don't live here anymore. This is my apartment. My home. And you are not welcome in it. Sophia, come on. Don't be like this. I know I screwed up, but we were together for 4 years. That has to count for something. You can't just throw me out on the street. I laughed and it came out bitter and sharp. I can't throw you out. Jake, you threw yourself out. You left me. You took all our money and left me with $30,000 in debt that you racked up. You didn't even have the decency to do it to my face. So no, I'm not being like this. I'm being exactly like someone who finally realized she married a selfish, lying coward. Don't say that. You know that's not true. I made a mistake, okay? I panicked. I felt trapped and I made a bad decision, but that doesn't mean everything we had was a lie. Doesn't it though? How long were you with Tara, Jake? How long were you spending our money on her while I was at home thinking we were building a future together? He was quiet for so long I thought maybe he'd left. Then barely audible, 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. All those late nights at work, all those business trips, all those times he'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine and explained it away. 6 months of lies, of betrayal, of living a double life while I played the fool. Get away from my door, Jake. I mean it. Leave now or I'm calling the police and telling them my estranged husband is trying to force entry into my apartment. You wouldn't do that. Sophia, please. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, then held the phone up to the door so he could hear. Yes, hi, I need to report. Okay, I'm going. Jesus, Sophia. I hung up before the dispatcher could answer and watched through the peephole as Jake stood there for another moment, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Then he turned and walked down the hallway and I heard the elevator ding as he left. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. I'd done it. I'd actually turned him away, had stayed strong even when part of me, that stupid, compassionate part that had loved him for 4 years, wanted to open the door and let him in. Wanted to fix his problems, to be the solution to his crisis like I'd always been. But I hadn't. I'd held firm. My phone rang. Sophia, I just got a very interesting call from Jake's lawyer. Well, not his lawyer exactly. Apparently he called a legal aid office asking about his rights regarding the separation papers. He was just here, I said. At my apartment. Begging me to let him stay because Tara left him and took his money. Michelle let out a low whistle. The karma bus doesn't waste time, does it? What did you tell him? I told him to leave or I'd call the police. Good. Perfect, actually. Here's what he's trying to do. He called legal aid asking if he could contest the debt responsibility. He's claiming that since it's a joint credit card, you're equally liable and he shouldn't have to pay the entire balance. I felt rage bubble up in my chest. Are you kidding me? He's the one who spent all that money. I know. And we have documentation proving that. The good news is that the legal aid attorney he spoke with apparently told him he doesn't have much of a case, especially if we can prove the charges were for an extramarital affair and that you received no benefit from the spending. Which we absolutely can prove. So what happens now? Now, we wait for his response to the separation petition. He has 21 days to file an answer. My guess is he won't fight it because fighting requires money for a lawyer, and from what you're telling me he doesn't have any. Once the separation is final, we move forward with the divorce, and during that process, we address debt division and asset distribution. How long will all of this take? Realistically, 4 to 6 months from start to finish, assuming he doesn't contest anything. The mandatory waiting period is 91 days, but with paperwork and court schedules, it usually runs longer. But Sophia, here's what I want you to understand. You're in the strong position here. You have documentation, you have witness testimony from his own parents about his lies. You have proof that he abandoned the marriage and depleted marital assets. Jake has nothing but excuses and debt. After I hung up with Michelle, I sat in my apartment, not ours, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Relief. Not happiness, not yet, but relief that I'd done the right thing. That I hadn't let him back in. That I was actually going through with this instead of backing down. My phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake. We could have worked this out like adults, but you had to get lawyers involved. Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. Jake. He'd gotten a new phone number or was texting from someone else's phone. I stared at that text for a long moment, reading the manipulation in every word. The blame shifting, the threats disguised as warnings, the suggestion that somehow I was the one being unreasonable. Classic Jake, trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. The old me might have fallen for it. Might have second-guessed everything, wondered if maybe I was overreacting, if maybe we really could work it out. But the old me died 3 days ago when I came home to an empty closet and a 3-sentence note. I blocked the number without responding. Then I took a screenshot of the message and emailed it to Michelle with the subject line, "Evidence of harassment." Let him try to play the victim. I had receipts. I had proof. I had the truth. And most importantly, I had myself back. That night, for the first time since Jake left, I slept in our bed. My bed. I'd changed the sheets, sprayed my favorite lavender room spray, and set up my laptop on his side of the bed to watch Netflix. I sprawled out in the middle, taking up all the space I wanted, and I realized something profound. I didn't miss him. I missed the idea of him, the fantasy of who I'd thought he was. But the real Jake? The liar, the cheater, the coward who'd shown up at my door crying because his plan fell apart? I didn't miss that man at all. In fact, I was glad he was gone. Jake tried calling 17 times over the next 2 days. I know because I counted. Each call went straight to voicemail since I'd blocked his number, but my phone still logged the attempts. He left messages too. I could see them piling up in my blocked folder, but I didn't listen to a single one. Michelle had advised me not to engage with him directly, to let all communication go through lawyers from this point forward. The more desperate he gets, the sloppier he'll be, she'd explained. Let him dig his own grave. On day 6 after his disappearance, or day 3 after his pathetic return attempt, I got a call from the credit card company again. Different representative this time, a man named David who sounded young and nervous. "Ms. Harrison, I'm calling because we've received a request from Mr. Jake Harrison to have your name removed from account ending in 4762. However, as I explained to him, we cannot remove a joint account holder without full payment of the outstanding balance, or without the consent and signature of both parties to transfer the debt solely to one person." I sat up straighter on my couch. What exactly did he say when you told him that? He became quite agitated. He insisted that the debt was not his responsibility and that you should be the one paying it since you were vindictive enough to kick him out. I almost laughed. And what did you tell him? I explained that regardless of personal circumstances, both account holders remain equally liable until the debt is satisfied or a court order states otherwise. He then asked if there was any way to declare bankruptcy to clear the debt. Now I did laugh, sharp and bitter. Let me guess. You told him that wouldn't remove my liability either? Correct. If one party declares bankruptcy, it only discharges their personal obligation. The creditor can still pursue the other account holder for the full balance. He didn't take that information well. After I hung up, I texted Michelle the update. Her response was immediate. Perfect. He's panicking. When people panic, they make mistakes. Keep documenting everything. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects with an intensity that surprised even me. That logo redesign I'd been struggling with before everything happened? I finished it in 2 days and the client loved it so much they gave me a bonus and recommended me to 3 other companies. I started staying late at the office not because I had to but because I wanted to. Because being productive felt good. Because building something, even just corporate branding, felt like proof that I was still capable, still valuable, still whole. My boss, Marcus, pulled me aside on Friday afternoon. Sophia, I don't know what's going on in your personal life and you don't have to tell me, but I want you to know that your work this week has been exceptional. Whatever you're channeling, it's working. Keep it up, but also don't burn yourself out, okay? I assured him I was fine, and weirdly enough, I meant it. I wasn't fine in the sense that everything was perfect. My marriage was over, I was facing potential debt, and my trust in people had been shattered. But I was fine in the sense that I was surviving. More than surviving. I was moving forward. Day 8 brought the twist I hadn't seen coming. I was at home eating takeout Chinese food and watching a true crime documentary when someone knocked on my door. Not Jake. The knock was too timid, too uncertain. I checked the peephole and saw Tara. I knew it was her immediately even though we'd never met. She looked exactly like the woman in the photos I'd found when I'd finally allowed myself to dig through Jake's social media. Blonde, petite, probably mid-20s, wearing expensive-looking clothes that I now realized had likely been purchased with my money. Every instinct told me not to open the door. But curiosity won out. I wanted to see her face. Wanted to look into the eyes of the woman who'd helped destroy my marriage. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. Can I help you? She flinched at my tone. Sophia? I'm Tara. Can we talk? Please? Just for 5 minutes. Why would I want to talk to you? Because, her voice cracked. Because I think we were both lied to and I'm trying to figure out what the hell happened, and you're the only other person who might understand. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch like she was afraid it might bite her. I stayed standing, arms crossed, waiting. Jake told me you two were already separated when we got together, she started, words tumbling out fast. He said the marriage had been over for months, that you were just living together until the lease ended, that it was amicable. He showed me apartment listings, said he was planning to move out. I didn't know, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I didn't know he was lying to both of us. When did you figure it out? In San Diego. We'd been there 2 days and he kept pressuring me to use my credit cards for everything. Said his were maxed out from the move but he'd pay me back. Then you served him those papers and he completely lost it. Started ranting about how you'd stolen his money, how you turned vindictive, how you were trying to ruin his life. And something clicked. The way he talked about you. It wasn't how you talk about an amicable separation. She pulled out her phone and showed me text messages. Jake telling her I was crazy. Telling her I'd always been controlling with money. Telling her he was the victim in our marriage, that he'd finally found the courage to leave an abusive situation. I felt sick reading his words, seeing how easily he'd rewritten our entire history. I confronted him, Tara continued. Demanded the truth. And he couldn't keep his story straight. First you were separated, then you weren't but the marriage was dead anyway, then you knew about us but didn't care. Then you didn't know but it was still somehow your fault for not being supportive enough. I realized he'd been lying about everything. So you left. So I left. Took what was left of my money and got the hell out of there. I flew back home to Ohio yesterday. She looked at me with something like desperation. I know you have no reason to believe me or forgive me but I need you to know. I'm not a homewrecker. I wouldn't have gotten involved if I'd known the truth. He told me you two were over. I studied her for a long moment. She looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely shaken. But I also didn't care. Here's what I know, Tara. You slept with a married man. Whether he lied about the details or not, he was still wearing a wedding ring. I've seen the photos. So either you're lying now or you didn't ask enough questions then. Either way, you made choices. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're right. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know that he's a liar. A manipulator? A coward? Yeah, I know. I was married to him. After she left, I sat in the silence of my apartment and felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for Tara, she'd made her bed. But for Jake, whose grand escape had imploded so spectacularly that even his mistress had abandoned him. I texted Michelle, "You won't believe who just showed up at my door." Her response, "Please tell me you got it on video." I hadn't. But I had something better. The confirmation that Jake's entire world was crumbling, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger. The universe was handling my revenge for me. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in March, exactly 4 months and 11 days after Jake left that note on our kitchen table. He never contested anything. Never showed up to a single court date. His lawyer, a tired-looking public defender he'd somehow managed to get assigned through legal aid, filed the minimum required paperwork and nothing more. The judge awarded me everything I'd asked for. The debt, all $30,000 of it, was assigned entirely to Jake. The court ruled that since he'd incurred the charges for an extramarital affair without my knowledge, and since I'd received no benefit from the spending, he was solely responsible. The $12,000 he'd taken from our joint account? The judge ordered him to pay back half of it to me, plus interest. $6,000 I'd probably never see, but having it on official court record felt like vindication anyway. I got to keep the apartment, our car, and the few pieces of furniture worth anything. Jake got his debts, his poor choices, and a court order that would follow him for years. Michelle had been right about everything. Jake had been sloppy, desperate, and his own worst enemy. The text messages he'd sent harassing me, the voicemails where he'd blamed me for his problems, the testimony from his own parents about his lies. All of it had painted a picture of a man who'd systematically destroyed his marriage through financial infidelity and abandonment. "You should feel proud," Michelle told me after the final hearing. "You handled this with grace and strength. I've seen people in similar situations fall apart, take their spouse back out of loneliness, or make rash decisions out of anger. You did none of those things. You protected yourself, documented everything, and let the legal system work. That takes courage." I thanked her, paid the last installment on her retainer, and walked out of that courthouse a divorced woman. Free. The first thing I did was call my mom. She'd been my rock through everything, flying out from Arizona twice to stay with me during the worst of it. She answered on the first ring. "It's done," I told her. "I'm officially divorced." I heard her exhale, long and relieved. "How do you feel, sweetheart?" I stood on the courthouse steps, March sunshine warm on my face, and I took inventory of my feelings. Sad. A little, for the loss of what I'd thought my life would be. Angry. Sometimes when I let myself think about the betrayal. But mostly, I feel light, Mom. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight, and now suddenly I can breathe again. She made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. "That's my girl. That's my strong, smart, beautiful girl. Your father and I are so proud of you." I learned later through the gossip chain of mutual friends what happened to Jake. He moved back in with his parents for a while, which must have been humiliating for a 30-year-old man who'd once bragged about his independence. Tom and Linda let him stay but made him get a job, any job, immediately. He ended up working at a call center for $10 an hour, a far cry from his former sales position. The debt haunted him. $30,000 doesn't just disappear, and Jake learned the hard way that running from your problems doesn't solve them. The credit card company started garnishing his wages. His credit score tanked. He couldn't get approved for an apartment on his own, couldn't finance a car, couldn't do any of the things he'd once taken for granted. I didn't take pleasure in his suffering exactly. But I didn't feel sorry for him either. He'd made his choices and now he was living with the consequences. That was just karma doing its job. As for me, I stayed in our apartment, my apartment, for another year. I painted the walls colors Jake would have hated. A deep teal in the bedroom, warm coral in the living room. I bought new furniture piece by piece, getting rid of everything that reminded me of him. I adopted a cat from a local shelter, a sassy orange tabby I named Mango who had zero patience for anyone's nonsense. He was perfect. Work continued to go well. That bonus project had led to more clients, which led to enough steady income that I started seriously saving for my dream of opening my own design agency. I opened an investment account, started reading books about entrepreneurship, took an online business course. I built the future I wanted brick by brick. Casey and I grew even closer. She introduced me to her book club, which turned out to be less about books and more about wine and therapy sessions with a group of hilarious women in their 30s. I made new friends, people who knew me only as Sophia the designer, not Sophia who'd been abandoned by her husband. It was refreshing. Dating wasn't on my radar for a long time. The idea of trusting someone again, of letting someone into my life and my heart felt impossible. But slowly over months I started to heal. Started to realize that Jake's betrayal said everything about him and nothing about me. That being hurt didn't mean I was broken. That being cautious didn't mean I had to be closed off forever. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I finally took Jake's name off my emergency contact forms and replaced it with Casey's. It was a small thing, administrative really, but it felt significant. Like I was officially closing that chapter. I ran into Jake once about 18 months after everything ended. I was at a coffee shop near my office and he walked in while I was waiting for my latte. We made eye contact and for a second neither of us moved. He looked older, tired. The confident swagger he'd always carried was gone, replaced by something hunched and defeated. Part of me wondered if I should say something, acknowledge him somehow. But then I realized I didn't owe him anything. Not my words, not my time, not even my acknowledgement. I picked up my coffee when they called my name, walked past him without a word and left. And you know what? Felt amazing. Now 2 years later I'm sitting in my own design studio. A small office space I rent downtown with my business partner, a brilliant woman named Kira I met through one of those design clients. We're not huge yet, but we're growing, profitable and doing work we're proud of. I'm dating someone new, a software engineer named Marcus who makes me laugh and who I'm taking things incredibly slow with because I've learned that rushing into anything is how you miss the red flags. My life isn't perfect. I still have moments where I feel the sting of betrayal, still have nights where I wonder how I missed the signs for so long. But those moments are fewer and farther between now and they don't define me anymore. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. If you're going through something similar, I want you to know, you will survive this. You will be okay. It won't happen overnight and it won't be easy, but you will come out the other side stronger than you ever imagined possible. Drop a comment below if this story resonated with you. Hit that like button if you believe in karma. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories about survival, strength, and the sweet taste of justice. Because here's what I learned. The best revenge isn't making someone else suffer. It's building a life so good, so full, so completely yours, that you forget you ever needed revenge in the first place.